Hey guys, welcome back to the show. Today I have a special guest who is going through a very special and unique experience. Her name is Holly Young. So Holly, do you want to introduce yourself to the people watching?
Sure. My name's Holly Young, as Bertie just said. I'm a Perth girl, born and bred, but I've recently been living overseas in Manchester in the UK for the past 2 years. Prior to that, I was sort of traveling around a lot. And yeah, that's pretty much me in a nutshell. Do a little bit of modeling here and there, pay the
Awesome.
bills.
And currently, whereabouts are you?
So I'm currently in captivity at mandatory quarantine, as they like to call it, at the Pan Pacific Hotel here in Perth, right in the city centre.
And what was it like while you were in Manchester? What was it like with the whole situation? How was the government kind of handling everything? How were people reacting to the whole situation?
It was, hindsight is a great thing. I feel like, the government in the UK did obviously the best that they could, but looking at it now, thinking back, we saw the effects in Spain, we saw the effects that happened in Italy. So realistically, I think they were a little bit behind in the precautions that they needed to take in regards to stopping the virus spreading. London Heathrow was still operating at full capacity for way longer than it should have been. So you can imagine all of these people flying in from all different parts of Europe with, carrying the disease, or they have the disease without even really realizing, because it can take up to 14 days before any symptoms are shown, which explains why in the UK we had such a dramatic spike pretty much instantly. And then the whole country basically went into mandatory lockdown, stage 5, where we were only allowed to leave our apartment or our houses for essentials, and we were allowed 1 hour of exercise a day. That was the state that I left it in. But from talking about it from the beginning to sort of the end of my time there, it sort of was like no one was affected by it directly. Therefore, no one was really taking it too seriously. And I think that's the case for a lot of countries as well. If you look at America, Brazil, they also had a massive spike, because until you're immediately affected or someone close to you or a friend of a friend, everyone was kind of like, oh, it won't happen to me, or it won't be, I'll be right. That whole sort of mindset. People weren't that worried about it. And then the numbers just rose, and it was basically overnight. And then that pretty much, once that massive spike happened was when people were like, whoa, okay, we really do, panic buying, for example, the toilet paper, going to the shops. And I remember going to one of the big superstores there called Asda, and Asda always has stuff, like it's never empty. And I went there pretty early, it was about 10 a.m. and it was empty. Like it was so weird to see such a big chain, such a big store with empty shelves, and then shelves left with like the bruised fruit was still there, but people were still buying it, and then cans were just thrown everywhere, and it was just like mayhem in the store. No one, it was also a little bit concerning to see how rude some people were. Like it was very snatch and grab over there, I felt. I don't know what it was like. What was it like here? Had you done a food shop?
Me personally, I haven't done like a massive food shop or anything like that. I go into shops and just buy the things that I need and get out. I don't try and hang around too much. But on news, you might have seen there's been crazy panic buying, people buying all these toilet rolls. There's been fights as well over toilet rolls, which is like if you told someone that there was going to be a fight over
Yeah,
toilet rolls like a year ago, you'd be like, man, these people are like insane.
insane.
But like now it's a normal thing, which is like, it's sad to see, people are being fed the fear of like, the whole pandemic through the news. The media is like stirring the pot and they're doing it.
Hyping it.
Attention.
Like
So
journalism right now, like the journalists are just getting a free ride because basically all they're talking about is COVID.
definitely. Like as soon as you turn the TV on, COVID. Even on YouTube, you have like a full section of COVID news, like around the
Mm.
world.
Or
So
any website, basically, you go onto, there's COVID-19. It's there.
definitely, and it's really interesting to see people's reaction and like behaviors moving forward, like from this point onwards, to see how people are changing their behaviors, especially like with the whole social isolation, social distancing. Now we're connecting through the net, through screens, whereas before,
Technology.
it's like, yeah, through technology, it's actually helping us stay connected, which is quite an interesting thing. But I want to ask you, you've been in quarantine for how long now?
So here in Australia, I've been in quarantine for 7 days. But before I flew, I left Manchester. I was a little bit ahead of the game, thanks to my dad. He was just on it, like with the numbers, the rise. He's the reason I actually made the decision to come back. And thank God I did travel when I did, but we'll get into that a little later. So I've been in quarantine here. I'm at my halfway point of 7 days. But in the UK, we were in stage 5 lockdown for about 8 days before I'd left. And I'd put myself into voluntary quarantine for about another, I'd say, 5 to 6 days before big Boris Johnson got on and did the big media press and essentially kind of freaked everybody out, but it worked because everyone, stayed in. So before then, I was already not mandatory, I was already doing self-quarantine, isolating at my apartment. I had my little dog and plenty of space, purely because of what had happened in Italy and around. It was sort of like quite serious. I knew it was going to be coming through. So many people in the UK, like, it's an aging population as well, so there's so many deaths. The 3 days leading up before I left, it was like 400, and then the second last day it was 5, and then the day I left it was like 600, just about. So yeah, so in a total time of quarantine and time I'll probably spend on myself, it's almost been a month, like that I've had, like I haven't had a cuppa or a catch up or anything like that with anyone in pretty much close to a month. I did, however, have two friends come over who'd been in quarantine in the UK and say goodbye to me because obviously I was relocating, and that was it. But other than that, it's like I'm almost at the point where I'm like, how am I going to go when I'm out of quarantine? Because it's just been, even though it was self-inflicted before it, and then obviously the government implemented the stage 5, it's realistically just been me for ages, and I think I kind of like it.
Yeah, I was about
I'm over the initial shock, but at the same time, thank God for technology, because I've been able to speak to friends from all over the globe, international friends explaining to me their circumstances, how their governments work, and just all the different, it's so diverse. There's not one person that hasn't been affected by COVID. There's literally, this has just never happened before. Even with swine flu and SARS, I don't think it traveled this quick and this aggressive. And especially our generation, we're the biggest socialites ever. We go out for breakfast, lunch and dinner if we want to, so yeah, it's really crazy to see how everyone's been affected, and the time spent in quarantine, what people actually, have to do and live without. There's certain comforts that you just physically cannot get in quarantine because you don't have access to getting them yourself. So therefore you can't access them.
Definitely. Which leads me on to my next question. How has this whole situation impacted your personal life? Other than being quarantined, how has it kind of affected the ways that you've behaved as a person?
I've learned to be a lot more tough, not tough skin wouldn't be the correct one, but more so independent. And, if I'm feeling bad, it's up to me to pull myself out of it, if that makes sense, and just be really strong and know and look at all the positives. So when I wake up in the morning, each morning I've been saying all the things I'm grateful for and not thinking about all the negatives, because it's very easy to go down the rabbit hole of how long is this going to go for, because we haven't been told the end date to anything. I know my friends in Spain have been in a very similar situation where they can't leave their apartments, very restricted, and it keeps getting extended and extended. So it's very easy to feel like, "Oh, this isn't going to end. What's the world going to look like after? Economically, are we going to be able to afford to survive or to travel again?" I can remember times, and I've traveled with you before, but I remember living in Manchester, traveling, to 3 different countries per month if I had the time, and now that just feels like a complete lifetime ago. So it's really easy to fall down, down into the downward spiral. So it's sort of, I just sort of thought to myself, let's not do that. Let's stay positive and just think of all the good things. One thing that I did is I actually went through my Instagram highlights, and it was weird because it was this double sword sort of effect, because I was reminiscing about all the great experiences and how much fun I've had, but then I was also like, damn, I want to do all of that again, and when am I going to be able to do it? So in terms of that as well, one thing that I really cannot wait to do is just get a big hug. You know what I mean? That personal connection from, like, when we get our meals, we get 3 meals a day plus a snack. And when they open the door, everyone is sort of similar. They try and keep it each door at a time, so they don't come to the next door till the other person shut. But when you and your neighbor across open the door, it's like, hey, what's going on? For that, like, personal connection. And then the staff here are so great. They have a chat, they ask how you are. A few days ago, I was really jet lagged because obviously I've flown from Manchester via Doha and then into Perth. So the timing has been all over the place. And I'd slept for most of the day, so I'd actually missed my breakfast and lunch. And they just leave it in a bag out the front of the door. So both of my breakfast and my lunch were there, and I didn't collect them. So, they rang my room a few times, and I got up and answered the phone, and then they came and sent somebody up just to check on me when I was just knocked out because I was sleeping. But yeah, you just don't ever think that this would ever happen. And a lot of people have asked me why I waited so late to come back, because initially I was actually going to ride this COVID storm out in the UK and then travel after, because all the flights were cancelled. Qantas and Emirates had cancelled and Etihad. So I sort of thought, well, it hadn't gotten as bad as it is now in the UK. So I sort of figured it'd be, I'll just ride the storm out. I had a whole apartment there, my dog, my whole life, all my belongings. So to uproot and leave that over something that we didn't have the numbers and we didn't know how it was evolving. New York hadn't had its massive spike at this point in time. And, when I was talking to my parents and things like that at home, I just said, no, I'll be right. I'll ride it out. And then obviously as the cases and the numbers started to rise drastically and very quickly, sort of got to the point where it's like, I'm not a British citizen, therefore I don't have the safety that I would normally have if I was here in Australia. You know what I mean? In terms of benefits and just the support of friends and family. So that's when I sort of made the decision to hightail it back here.
Awesome, that's great. For me personally, I was supposed to leave for the Philippines and Malaysia at the end of last month. So, quick question: what was it like traveling to Doha, and was that your first time? And if it wasn't your first time, kind of how was it different in the airport compared to what it usually is?
Yeah, so this was actually my second time to Doha. I've actually been, to Qatar and to Doha. So I've actually been to Doha. I spent a week there in 2018. And Doha is a very interesting city. It's not as advanced as Dubai in terms of women's rights. It was very covered up and very, people were really, would look at women differently. Opposed to this time, 2 years later, just the airport was just a ghost town. No one was worried about if a midriff was showing, if someone had a t-shirt on or anything like that. Like, there was none of that concern. It was more so people were just, I think everyone was worried that their next leg was going to be cancelled. But yeah, compared to the last time I went to Doha, definitely a very different experience. But Doha International Airport is known for this big giant teddy, and it was still there. So, yeah.
No, awesome. Was there any sort of, how can I put this? Were there any different types of procedures in place throughout COVID while you were in the airport of Doha?
The security were very, very, I guess I would actually say agitated. It was like they didn't want to be there. Like they had to be there. I found the staff at Manchester Airport, and I've flown in and out of that airport so many times, and I could not believe how the security were real. There was more staff than that. First of all, there was more staff than there were people flying. So there was an in excess of staff, and they were just in their own world and just very rude. You'd think in a pandemic, you'd smile back. A young girl traveling on her own, obviously I would have looked anxious because of the circumstances that I was under. And I remember giving a few people a little smile, and there was just nothing back. And scanning through, travel size suitcases and things like that. They were really checking everything very thoroughly, but they were also keeping their distance. And it was weird because it didn't look like anyone was actually doing their job, if that makes sense. They were more so caught up in the whole, COVID-19, we're still at work, we've got to wear gloves and things like that. A lot of the staff in Manchester didn't have gloves on, but in Doha, they all had gloves, they all had masks, and Doha, they were very professional. They were kind, they were like, one of them, they had to check through my carry-on, and the man was so nice, so they were more compassionate, I think, because maybe they've seen more people going in and out, I'm not sure. But procedure-wise, it was pretty much the same, just they were just making sure that everyone was going through at a faster rate, like no one was really, it was just trying to get everyone through as quick as possible because, social distancing and things like that was definitely in play at the airport, which was a good feeling because everyone was, abiding by the rules, which means, it's your less chances of actually getting, corona.
Definitely. Out of curiosity, how many people were on board your flight from the both legs, so Manchester to Doha, Doha to Perth?
So my Manchester leg, I was the only one at the gate for a good, I got there 30 minutes before, I got there a little bit before then, but 30 minutes before boarding, there was no one there. A little bit closer to time, with the social distancing, they actually had it mapped out, and there was only 12 people. Wow. So there was only 12 of us on a 7.5-hour flight, international flight. It was insane. I know the pricing with the tickets was a little bit more expensive, and a lot more expensive for business. So there was a really economy. I paid £850 for my entire 2 flights, which I think you would normally get return, because I think that's about 1,800 Australian dollars, I think, with the conversion rate. You would normally get that return economy flight, but this was just one way. Business class was £7,000 one way, which is ridiculous. And on my first flight, the business class was actually shut off. There was no one flying it. We all had our own section, which was really good. The air hostesses and everyone like that on board, they were all really calm. I think they've been told to, but they all had gloves and masks on. Obviously transferring via Doha, that airport is normally packed, and there wasn't many people. It was a Coles store when it's about to close. There just wasn't many people. People were just doing what they had to do, and then that was it. No one was really talking to each other. Everyone was sticking to themselves. Then my flight to Australia, I think I'd probably say there's maybe 25 people coming back. I had a conversation with 2 gentlemen that had flown all the way from Africa, and it had cost them $4,500 to get back. Wow. Which was insane. They were in Zanzibar. Yeah. So, yeah, it was really interesting to hear other people's journey. For me, I feel like I was quite blessed. Like, I left Manchester, my flight time, my entire travel time was 21 hours, which is really good. So it was basically 7.5 to Doha. I think I had an hour and 15 minutes in the airport there, and then I transferred on to the 11 hours into Perth, which we did in, I think, 9 hours and 45 minutes. So you had some tailwind. And then that was a whole nother experience, just landing here back into WA, into Perth.
What was your feeling like when you first landed into Perth?
Relieved, like when I got on that flight because the whole week I initially left Manchester. I made the decision on Sunday night. My dad rang me and he said, look, Holly, this situation is not getting any better. It's going to get worse. It's going to get harder and harder to actually get flights. So I think it's best if you can get out of there. And he initially wanted me to fly on Wednesday. And I was like, Dad, that's not possible. I can't pack up an entire apartment, find a little foster home for my dog, organize shipping back. I've been living there for 2 years. So you can imagine all the stuff that I've accumulated. So I knew that wasn't possible. So I basically gave myself Thursday as a realistic day, and I was able to literally worked around, I'll never forget it, like I worked around the clock, packing, ordering boxes. And the thing is, it wasn't even easy to order moving boxes because in the UK, everything is shut down. So if it's not an essential service, it's really hard to get the things that you need. So fortunately, I was able to find a company that was able to deliver me some moving boxes, and then I began the packing up process. Fortunately for me, a good friend of mine, Debbie, she was happy to take my little darling Winnie in, and Winnie's living her best life. My dog's living her best life in London, which we were actually going to do the drive. So a friend of mine and I were going to drive Winnie to London. It's a 4-hour drive from Manchester to London. We were told we rang the police because they started to close the counties down. So they're putting roadblocks up. So we wouldn't have actually even been able to have made it to London unless you have a specialised pass from the MP or from whoever it is, the jurisdiction that they give the passes to. So I ended up having to find a pet courier to come and pick Winnie up. It cost me £450 to take her there. I know I wasn't too happy about that, but it's what you've got to do. And she got there safe and sound, and thankfully that happened on the Tuesday. So I had the rest of Tuesday, Wednesday to pack the whole place up. The moving people came and collected my boxes. And then, that was sort of packing Manchester up. Obviously I had to let my landlady know the situation, and she was really great, but it was just like an end of an era. Like, it was just to even be there and just see my apartment so empty, and just knowing that, like, probably not going to come back here. I was such a premature exit, but it needed to be done. And the journey itself, like, I had to sort of break it up into stages. So the first task was finding Winnie a home, because obviously she's like a child. The next thing was like compiling everything in my life basically into these boxes, and then getting them to a safe place, and then making sure the apartment was set. And then at the back of my mind the entire time was, because I kept seeing that people's flights were getting cancelled. So I was like, that was honestly the hardest thing about it, was, knowing that you've got a flight booked, but not knowing whether you're actually going to be able to successfully travel. And I've spoken about my experience quite openly on Instagram, and I've had about 3 or 4 people message me saying that they're now traveling and their routes are about 40 hours, 45 hours, 51 hours, and they even have more anxiety because, these flights are able to be cancelled. And when you do book, there is a clause, so it is that was probably the hardest thing. Like, I was checking my emails and my travel updates every day, being like even when I was at the airport checking in, I was like, oh my God, like, am I going to get on this flight? And what happens if I get stuck in Doha, and all of these thoughts run through your head. So when I landed into Perth, I was just like, I did it. Now, the next part of the journey is the one that I'm still in, halfway through, and the mandatory quarantine. Now, when I landed, I still didn't know where I was going to be staying. So I knew that some people were at Crown, some people were at Rockpool, others were at the Duxton. I fortunately got the Pan Pacific, which I'm more than happy with. The staff here are really dedicated to making sure that, you know, everyone is not going completely crazy, climbing up the walls. For example, today I had previously did a post on Instagram, and they saw how much that I love pho. And today for my lunch, they actually ordered me some, and it came in a little box, and it actually made my day because I'd woken up feeling pretty shitty. Like I wasn't, you know, it's like halfway through, I'm like, I've got to go a whole nother 7 days. You know, you just, you know, people say, oh, you're in a hotel. You know, everyone is sort of saying that some people are stuck at home with their parents and they're getting on top of each other. So they're kind of like, oh, we wish we could be in the hotel, you know, but it's like, no, because there's no fresh air. There's no trying to even stay motivated to even work out in your hotel room is hard because obviously there's limited space and there's zero equipment. So, you know, I got some 5-kilo dumbbells dropped off to me by my dad. So hopefully I can come out of here, yeah, in decent shape. But yeah, it's really been something that I don't think I'll ever forget or fully process. I feel like everything is just boom, and it's going to be, you know, a little bit of time to get through it all. But I haven't cried. I haven't had I've seen a few girls getting really emotional, but I think I'm not a big emotional person like that. I've just been trying to focus on all the positives and think about all the things that I want to do when I get out, which I probably can't even do because we all have to self-isolate anyway. But, you know, you got to think of the positives here.
Definitely. No, it's great. I'm glad that you're also back home in Perth rather than stuck in
Oh,
another country.
yeah, you just don't want to be stuck in a foreign country, especially one with such high number of cases. It would be different if it was, you know, an island or somewhere where it was, you know, very limited people and you knew that you'd be fine if you just to ride the storm out. But because the UK is so highly populated in such a small area, it's, you know, everyone was basically saying they'd be shocked if they didn't catch it. So when you start hearing people say things like that, it's almost a little bit concerning. And yeah, pretty much once all the pubs and clubs all shut down, I think people started to take it more seriously. When I left Manchester, there were police patrolling the streets, and they had assembled the army and fire brigades in warehouses, so around London, all around the country, in case, just on standby, keeping them in quarantine so they were fit and healthy in case, you know, a full state of emergency, you know, broke out and they needed to have them. So it was good that they were taking that precaution. And I think my heart goes out to all the NHS workers, which is their healthcare system, working around the clock, because there just are so many people over there. Just every day keeps on rising. But I think now the numbers have maybe subsided a little. Don't quote me on that, but when I was leaving, it was on the rise. Like the fact that over 600 people died in one night. I mean, a lot of them had prior conditions and they were of an aging community. It's still really sad, you know, like 600 a day, 500 the day before, 400, you know, like really scary. And towards the end, it wasn't enjoyable leaving the house to even go and get groceries or go to the pharmacy. Like waiting out the front and them only having 3 people in a store at once was just like, you know, there's security out the front, people come in, people go out, you know, you have to wait. You can be waiting out the front for, you know, 30 minutes and it's cold in the UK. It's not like you're sitting in the sun here getting some vitamin D. It's, you know, you're basically cold thinking, when the hell can I get back home?
Completely different situation compared to here in Australia, isn't it?
Yeah, like it's so much more relaxed here, like
Yeah.
so much more.
When you flew from Doha to Perth, what was it like landing in Perth, and were there any other different kind of procedures in place?
Okay, so getting off the plane, I think obviously I was relieved because the journey was sort of over travel side of things, but no information is given to you prior to landing. So I didn't know where I was going to be doing my quarantine, and that was the one thing that obviously I'm going to be spending 2 weeks alone in a room. You want to know where you're going. Like, I wish that they sort of had told us at the start of the journey at the airport that there was some sort of communication from the Australian government, whether it was an email that they knew we were coming, or something like that, just to touch base. But getting off the flight was pretty similar to normal trips, except for the airport was completely empty. Like, I have never seen customs so bare. Getting off, we went through, we got our temperature tested, and we had to cough into this thing, and that was pretty much the only difference. They gave us a lot of legal documents and government documents explaining the do's and don'ts and what we cannot do and what will happen if we do the wrong thing. So they were very clear on that, which was good. And then once we went through customs, we grabbed our bags, and I'm sure the Perth people will know, you go through your baggage claim, and then there's you go through, you give them your ticket and the declaration form. And then at the end of that line is when you found out where we were going. So I was like running. I was like, where am I going? Where am I going? Now, like Pan Pacific. And I was like, yes, it's not the Duxton. So I was really happy to be coming here. And then that's when I think everyone kind of relaxed, because we all knew we were going to be in the city, Pan Pacific, we can't complain. And then the weird thing though was with the social distancing and just seeing all the conveyor belts empty, but just chairs. So there was all chairs spaced out, and everyone just had to sit there with their luggage and fill out a form. And then one by one, they took us through the baggage claim exit, and it was so cool to see the backside of the airport. Like, it's a whole different, like, it's crazy how it all works. And then there were 3 big Trans-Perth buses. And the funny thing is, I was like, I haven't been on a Trans-Perth bus in years. Didn't have my smart rider, but they still let me on. Everyone got on. There was about 5 of us on each bus, maybe a little more. And then we had police escort. So there was police everywhere. There was probably about 10 or 12 police officers standing around the buses. Then they all got into cars. And I managed to get some footage of it as well. So there was the 3 buses, and then the police cars obviously in front and behind us. And then obviously from the airport, we came through into the city. And then one by one, they let us off the bus. We checked into the the Pan Pacific, gave them our passport details, filled out a quick little health questionnaire, and then we were taken to our room. And it was, it was at about 8 p.m. at night. So, we were all pretty tired, and I think I slept well that night. And I was just, super relieved. But it was actually kind of cool to see that side of the airport. And because we were basically not on the tarmac, but where the planes and everything all go was where the buses were. So we had a little bit of a walk from the actual airport to where the buses were. And then even the buses leaving the airport, all the big gates, the security signs, the flashing lights. I was actually put my AirPods in, and I just put some music on, a bit of Fleetwood Mac to get me through. And it was but that was honestly probably that's something that I think that I'll never forget, was actually that part of the journey, was just like going through the back end of an airport with police just everywhere in the pandemic, and then getting onto a bus, and we sat on the bus for a while, and just the sirens and the sunset as it all happened. So it was really honestly like something out of a movie. And it wasn't scared or anything like that, felt completely safe, but it was just, probably will never happen again, hopefully, touch wood. But yeah, that was really just, I won't ever forget that. And that journey, because you know, you go down the freeway and you come across the bridge, go past Crown. It's like normally when you do that with Perth, it's like a happy thing. You've come back from like Bali, or you're going to the airport. Is it Canning Highway? I can't remember the name of the road, but you know, when you come off the airport and you go past Crown, and then you go over the bridge and then like past the causeway. And and normally that like airport route is full of joy, or like you're either happy to be back or whatever. But and just with the police escorting us through, it was just it's almost like unheard of, you know. That was something that I think I'll, you know, it's not a bad memory, but it's not a good one. It's just like, you know, it's kind of cool. But yeah, I don't think I'll be forgetting that anytime soon.
So you've been in quarantine or self-isolation for 7 days here in Perth. Out of these 7 days, you've had a lot of time to reflect on yourself and like kind of ask yourself a lot of questions, right? What have you learned about yourself in these past 7 days?
Well, I'm actually very proud of myself, and that's not something that I say often. I'm a very confident person, but I never really like would ever be like, oh, I'm proud of my achievements and this and this and that. Like, it's just not me. But after what I've gone through, it's kind of like the sense of like I'm resilient, I'm strong, like I can get through this. This is not going to be the end. It's just going to make me, hey, like the word I want to say is mother. I don't know if I can swear, but like motherfuckers. I fucking I flew through COVID-19 and I did like I could not have done it in a more hectic way. Do you know what I mean? Packing up where I live, such short notice, leaving my beautiful apartment, my dog, my friends and my family, like that was my life. So I literally had to leave that, no choice in the matter, no safety in even my journey back home because flights are getting cancelled left, right and center. Not only that, you know, I had to stay off media. I could not read the media. I could not go into detail here in Australia about influencers and other people complaining about their quarantine conditions. I think it was more happening over east because there's a higher number of people there with it. So it's harder to house them and put them in their quarantine. But I just couldn't go through reading that because it was just going to give me anxiety. So I just thought to myself, no, I'll deal with each problem as they arise and I won't overthink it. And that's kind of what it's taught me the most is that like, if I can do this, I can do anything. And just, that's probably the biggest thing. Like everything is going to be okay. You know, it figures itself out one way or the other. And like, it's a lesson or a blessing. You know what I mean? Like I could have got stuck there if I had waited another week, but I didn't. You know, I chose to hustle and I chose to get on that flight and get home. You know, like fortunately, I was able to find a place to move into after my 2 weeks of quarantine. But, you know, at that point in time, I didn't even know where I was going to live when I was coming back here, you know, and I haven't lived in Perth in almost 4 years. So obviously I have family here, but, you know, when you've been out of home for as long as I have, you don't realistically want to be going back home. But if I had to, I would. But other things it's also shown me who my true friends are, and people that I sort of thought I could rely on a little more that haven't come through. But then again, at the same time, my family, my dad, my best friends and like my inner circle, they have been there like 100 step of the way, you know, like calling, messaging me, offering to, you know, send me money or like, you know, I've had flower deliveries, as you can see, I've had wine sent to me, like just little tiny things like that. And just even people offering, oh, hey, I'm going to be driving past the city. Do you want me to drop you off like a nice hot coffee? Or do you want, you know, do you want a nice little, like, do you want some chocolate? Or, you know, just those little things like that in a situation like this, little home comforts like mean the world. Because here, you know, we're only allowed to travel with a limited baggage. It was very, very expensive to add extra baggage. So I'm used to traveling with excess baggage all the time. Like, you know, like I'm not going to lie, I am no stranger to excess baggage, but I cannot justify paying £300 for 2 kilos. That's like a shoe.
Wow.
Like, like that £300, 600 Australian dollars when it was, because I went to add a full another 30 kilos, you know. So I was thinking, okay, I'll pack, because another point is, you know, when you don't know where you're going with the quarantine, you don't know what you're going to have access to. So I went to Tesco and I bought 2 bottles of wine because I need wine, brought food, you know, like my favorite little treats and things like that. And I took out items of clothing and things like that because I knew that these were more important than a few extra tops and things like that. So the fact that you only also had that was a little bit of, not really a concern, but it was an annoyance, because, you know, like you're moving, people are coming back, like you can't leave to go and get things if you run out. So yeah, it's been a big whirlwind of a past few weeks. I mean, as you know, I've just completed week 1. I've got a whole nother week. It is getting harder, I will say. The first few days in quarantine were pretty easy. Like, I was back in Perth, everyone was like, oh, you're back. Like, messages, so my inbox, like even now, struggling to keep up with everyone, which I appreciate so much, everyone's kind words. But, you know, coming back, but now it's kind of the reality of it all is setting in. I actually had a few symptoms of corona, and that was adding to my anxiety. Like, I woke up with a really sore throat, but it's subsided now, and I think it was just because I'm been in the UK. I haven't had air conditioning for 2 years, so I'm not used to breathing in this recycled air all the time, and it does affect your body because, you know, you just feel different. It's not the same. To, you know, getting that fresh air. It's fortunate enough that I have these big windows. I'll show you guys, you know, that I can get that sun coming through. I've heard some people don't even have windows, not here in Perth, but at other quarantine facilities. So I could only imagine what that would be like. So I wish these would open. That would be really nice, just to let the fresh air come through. So I think the first thing I do, the first time I think I'll cry will be when I leave, and probably when I see my dad. I just give him a big hug and probably have a bit of a cry. But yeah, it's like, I won't lie, it's not easy. It takes a strong person to get through this, and there are some younger people down the hall, and we all kind of sing out to each other, and we can talk on the phone. And that's been really important, just that constant communication and knowing that there are people going through the same thing as you, because it's just not easy, because, you know, sometimes you're your own worst enemy in situations like this, because you think you couldn't have done anything different, but it's just like, oh, for fuck's sake, like, why am I in this position? Like, I just want to go home and just, you know, not be in this room.
Which leads on to my last question. If you could give any advice into people that are currently experiencing social isolation or quarantine, what advice would you give to those people?
Okay, this is a very broad question. Mandatory or non-mandatory?
It could be a bit of both, just a kind of like general advice.
General advice, if you're in your home, self-isolating, stay in your home, please. Like, stay in your home and be grateful that you are in your home. Do you know what I mean? Because there's some of us that aren't, and we don't have those pleasures. So the thing, I'll revert back to what I say each morning, is just 5 things to be grateful for, because it really does uplift your mood. People in mandatory isolation, just stay strong, and if you're not feeling good, reach out, talk to people, communicate. It's the best way of, you know, feeling better and sort of getting a little bit of, it's a hard one to sort of find the words for. Reassurance that like it's going to be okay. But I will give some advice for people that might currently still be traveling at the moment, because I know I've been giving advice to people left, right, and center, because obviously I've been so open about it on my Instagram. And honestly, like if you're away and you're umming and ahhing, get back to Australia. Like do everything in your power to get home, because you will instantly feel better. The sense of relief that I felt coming back to Australia, like I don't think I've ever been so relieved to come home ever. And I mean, I'm a jet setter, traveled the world so many times, so it's not really ever been like, oh, I'll never be able to get back home, or I can just jump on a flight, you know. If anyone's trying to get back home, Qatar Airways, book your flight as soon as you can. Plenty of hand sanitizer. I know people say that the masks don't work, but just don't take the risk. It's airborne. So if you can prevent it, get a mask, a bandana, anything you can tie around your face. When I initially left, I had a bandana. And then I was fortunate enough to get some masks mid-flight, and gloves. The gloves, and with the gloves, even use your hand sanitizer with the gloves. Avoid touching your face, your mouth. It's, you know, natural for us, especially girls. So, you know, tie your hair up. Don't have your hair down like it is here, because obviously you're going to be putting it behind your ears and, you know, playing with it and things like that. So yeah, get home safely, and the social distancing is really important. I'm a little bit, I wouldn't say let down, but I think because I've been so directly affected by corona, not in health wise, but in mental health and everything else, seeing people at the beach, not social distancing, seeing people still going to cafes and things like that, like this is a real pandemic, and people need to understand, like, boo-hoo, stay home, make a coffee, make your own smashed avocado. You know, like I saw people at Yellow and certain places over the weekend just gone, and they're saying they're still social distancing, but this is a real problem, and there will be another spike if people don't start cooperating. I think WA has been doing a really good job, which is fantastic, but I think it's important that we don't get complacent, and that we continue to, you know, listen and just do the right thing. Just stay home and do your part, and, you know, be a little local hero. It's not hard to do. Just stay home.
Great advice. If there's anyone that wants to ask Holly for advice, Holly, what's your socials? What's your social handle?
My Instagram is Holzyoung, HOLLZYOUNG. Feel free to hit me up, send me a message. I'm getting a lot of messages at the moment, so if I don't respond to you ASAP right away, I'll get back to you. But I've been there, done that. I'm still halfway through my mandatory. It's going to be very interesting to see how the next 7 days goes, because I'm getting cabin fever hard.
Now, my last question for you, if you could ask the viewers one question, it could be about anything, like for your own personal kind of information, what would it be?
Why do you guys think it's okay to not listen to the rules? Why do you think it's okay to still go to the beach? I saw a video today of a car, a friend of mine was driving past the beach, and you could just see it was packed. Why do you guys think that it's acceptable to not listen to the rules and say, yeah, you know, like there's still people going out boating, you know, with 3 or 4 people on their boat? Like, why do you guys think that that's okay? Just because you're not affected immediately by it, you know, doesn't mean that you're not going to. So yeah, pretty much like, why do you think that you're, you know, above the guidelines? Just, you know, behave. That's my question.
Perfect.
I want to know
Awesome.
if people are doing the wrong thing.
So for anyone that wants to answer that question, just comment in the box below. But yeah, thank you so much for spending time with me to have a good chat. I'm glad you're safe.
Not like I can go anywhere.
Yeah, for sure.
For another 7 days, we'll have to do a virtual far, eat some far. So
100%. Let's do it. Let's set it up.
yeah.
Awesome. Cheers for that.
Cheers, Bernie. Thanks for the chat. Everyone else, sending big love. And yeah, wash your hands.
Stay safe and wash your hands.
Stay indoors and wash your hands.